On today's edition of the show, we're going to provide an update in regards to Aleksander Barkov's injury after leaving Game 3 early. We are going to compare the Florida Panthers' run to another team that made a Cinderella run pretty recently. And we're going to discuss more about how the Florida Panthers went from dysfunction to contender.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Wednesday, May 24th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter at LO_FLA Panthers and on Instagram as well at LO_FLA Panthers as well. And special shout out to the everydayers who come here every day to get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So today is a special edition of the show because usually Wednesday's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, it is a Winans Wednesday, but it's a special kind of Winans Wednesday because in the 3 seasons that I've been doing the show, every time that I have brought a guest in, it's been done virtually. But for the first time in the history of Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, it is an in-person show as I bring in my guest here, Jacob Winans, on this in-person Winans Wednesday edition of the show as we give you the Chris Collinsworth slide-in on the show. Welcome to the debut of an in-person show. And my friend, how are you feeling about the Panthers being up 3-0 against the Carolina Hurricanes, my friend?
It is awesome. Super cool to be doing an in-person show. Definitely a first for both of us, but no, it's great. And I feel a little better if the Heat had just finished off that game, but I just tweeted out we're apparently us watching together is really, really bad luck. So we're not going to be doing that tomorrow, but at least we're together for tonight's show, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, getting together, eating some wings, and then of course doing some show prep right prior to tonight's show. But let's also provide a little bit of an update on the injury front for Aleksander Barkov, the captain. And Paul Maurice did go on WQAM this morning and spoke on the Joe Road Show, talking about how he's optimistic about the injury, nothing too severe. I think he used the word sinister as far as the wording for it. And we were talking about this in our chat for Panther Parkway, how I don't think that Paul Maurice would have used that terminology as far as missing a bar mitzvah if he thought that anything was serious. And it's great to see that the captain is going to be okay. No guarantee that he does play in Game 4. Paul Maurice did speak later to the media that day that he's going to test it out to see. He tested more of it out today. Going to test it out more tomorrow, and maybe we even see the captain back in Game 4. Something that the Florida Panthers were cautiously optimistic about.
Yeah, so as far as Paul Maurice's comments post-game last night, I thought it was pretty funny personally. Like you said, I really don't think he'd be joking around about the injury to the captain if it were something serious or something that they were like incredibly concerned about. So I thought it was cool. I thought it was lighthearted. I felt like it kind of took a lot of the concern and worry off without him actually saying, Barkov is fine. I love seeing on Twitter today everyone talking about the bark mitzvah. That's definitely going to be a topic of conversation the farther the Panthers go. But yeah, the play itself looked really awkward. I mean, it didn't really it looked like a nothing hit. I didn't really see what happened. It took a while for them to even identify where he got hurt. And credit to the TNT camera crew for actually locating the play where he got injured. But As far as the outlook going forward, like the legendary Wayne Gretzky was saying post game yesterday, the Panthers have the luxury of a 3-0 lead right now. They have time on their hands. They don't have to press him to play this next game. Of course, you'd rather get this done early, and then it's even more time for him to rest. But the Panthers showed last night they're capable of winning with Barkov not in the lineup. They can do it. They did it the hard way. They did not get a lot of scoring. They got just one single goal on a power play, but W's are W's. They got it done without him. They've proven they can. It'd be better to have him in the lineup, but when you're up 3-0, you have the luxury of, if he needs an extra game, you can give him that, because a 3-1 lead is still a pretty strong stranglehold on the series. So the Panthers are in a good spot, and the news coming out today about Barkov's injury is definitely overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, and you said it best with Aleksander Barkov, and not necessarily. I don't want to say the words taking more risks, as in him not as in Maurice taking the foot off the gas. These guys are going to be putting their foot on the gas regardless of everything, and of course, it helps that Sergei Bobrovsky is 132 of 135 in the crease. That's most stops in the first 3 games of a conference final. Matthew Tkachuk still performing the way he is, having the most points in a single postseason, just recently passing Dave Lowry. And the fact that the Panthers as well in this whole run, they're the lowest team to get 2 straight 3-0 series leads, going back to the Toronto series and now. So it's just really encouraging that the news for Aleksander Barkov is just there, and that we as fans can exhale and breathe a sigh of relief when it comes to Aleksander Barkov and his status for Game 4. And I really have a good feeling that the Panthers, regardless of everything, that they're going to be fine, and that they will still play hard for their goaltending, for their coach, and their captain, even though whether he's on the ice or not. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2. We're going to discuss more about the Florida Panthers and a comparison to their run now, and another team that had a Cinderella run just recently, a few years ago. We're going to discuss that next year on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it's all about making sure that every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check so you know every part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. That's right. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Segment number 2 here on this special Winans Wednesday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, an in-person edition of the show. And Jacob, one thing I was very curious about, even before Game 3 ended, of course, Bob was on such a tear. I just started to saying Bob Smythe. I just put it in my description on yesterday's show, just because, and just when you talk about recent history for a team that was, not expected to be here, to say it best. The first team I thought of, and the first goaltender I thought of, was also a person making $10 million as well. Well, 10.5, slightly over. It was Carey Price of the Montreal Canadiens. And I decided to, just looking up, if for people watching on the YouTube, I have a little bit of a Venn diagram here, comparing and contrasting the runs that the Florida Panthers are currently on and what the Montreal Canadiens did. And some of the comparisons, both of them came back from a 3-1 deficit.
Yep.
Both of them had Eric Staal. Eric Staal, the difference in this one is Eric Staal was a free agent signing, a few weeks after, because the LTIR, it helped the Panthers, of course, the PTO. But Buffalo trading for Eric Staal for a 3rd and a 5th. Both have a $10 million goalie. They were the last team in the postseason. Both went through coaching changes, but Montreal went through theirs midseason versus Panthers in the offseason. And a whole bunch of one-goal wins. The Montreal Canadiens had 10 of them in their run to the Stanley Cup Final before losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning 4-1. The Panthers currently have 8, and they are 1 win away from the Stanley Cup Final. When it comes to the Panthers and when you talk about recent history for the Habs as well, in that just what do you see as far as what they're doing on the ice?
So I see rock solid goaltending. That's number one. Carey Price stole them a bunch of games in that run, and Sergei Bobrovsky has done the same thing for the Panthers this year. When you win so many 1-goal games, the margin for error there is so slim. And we were just talking about this pre-recording. The Panthers yesterday's game was the first regulation win for the Panthers since game 2 of the series against Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
They've had to be clutch. They've had to develop that clutch gene. They've had to win overtime games. There was the 4 overtime game. When you have those razor thin margins of error, the goaltending has to be nearly perfect because 1 goal is literally the difference. You give up 1 extra goal, and that's the difference in a game. That's the difference in the series. And Sergei Bobrovsky he simply has just not allowed it. He hasn't given up that 1 goal that could swing the entire series. So that's the biggest similarity I see between this year's Panthers team and that Montreal Canadiens team. A big difference, of course, is that was the year with the weird division alignments. They went through the All-Canadian division, the North Division. But both teams had to run through the Toronto Maple Leafs, which they honestly, just the eye test, they handled the Maple Leafs in a very, very similar way. Physicality, beating up on the star players for that team, just really smothering them, not allowing them to get their offense going. That's what the Panthers did against Toronto. That's what the Canadiens did against Toronto that year. I think center play is another thing that's really caught my eye compared to that season. Nick Suzuki was so good defensively as a center in that season for Montreal, and Sasha Barkov has been that and more. And I think what puts the Panthers over the top and gives them a much more legitimate chance of contending and winning these next 5 games needed to reach the promised land compared to Montreal is the top end scoring talent, the superstar talent that the Panthers are afforded with right now. You've got Matthew Tkachuk, which Montreal would have killed to have a player like that that season. Sam Reinhart has had really timely goals. Sam Bennett has been fantastic. So those are the type of players that really put it over the top for me. But defensively, I think it's very similar defensively. I think Mark Stahl has taken on that Ben Sherratt role. I think Aaron Ekblad has been that Shea Weber type player. I think Brandon Montour has just been fantastic. Yeah, I can't even find a comparison really on that Montreal team for what Brandon Montour has done. Gus Forsling, very different style compared to Edmondson, Joel Edmondson over in Montreal, but same result, rock solid defense on the left side of the blue line. So I think there's a lot of similarities to that Montreal team that made a run. I just think the Panthers have a much better shot roster construction wise of actually finishing it.
Yeah, and you talk about for them as well, as far as creating mistakes for their opposition as well, and that's what the Panthers and the Canadiens did in both. I mean, 82 game season versus a 56. Also the different expectations coming in. I mean, Montreal was the 12th seed in the Stanley Cup bubble before defeating the Edmonton Oilers, who were the 5th seed that year, while the Florida Panthers were the President's Trophy winners as well. The Panthers invested in a young goaltender. We spoke about pre-recording how the Montreal Canadiens, once they gave that contract to Carey Price, they didn't invest in it heavily in a young goaltender as well, and trade deadline moves as well. The Montreal Canadiens made 3 trade deadline moves there, while the Panthers made absolutely 0. And point per game as far as point pace. Panthers are this season with 92 points. They're 1.12 points a game, and while Montreal was 1.05 per game, which would be 86 points in a typical season, which wouldn't have Montreal even making it to the Stanley Cup playoffs in a normal season. But of course, you're not playing everyone. You're only playing in the Canadian division specifically. You're only playing 6 other teams in there. Of course, with the odd number there, you had to play some teams 10 times, some teams 9 as far as that. And both once they advanced to the second round, both had quick series as well.
Yeah.
The Panthers with the Maple Leafs this year around the Toronto, the Montreal Canadiens in the second round against the Winnipeg Jets, who swept them, and it all changed, of course, with the brutal hit that Mark Scheifele had on Jake Evans on an empty net goal. That was just that the game was over at that point too. And you're wondering, what the heck? Why are you making that type of dirty play? I mean, and we also saw a dirty play from Jamie Benn in Game 3 between the Dallas Stars and the Vegas Golden Knights, and that took the spirits away from the Dallas Stars. But also that series in 2021 took the spirits out of the Winnipeg Jets as well. Paul Maurice can probably tell you all about that. When talking about the spirits that were just taken away from them. And I mean, Bobrovsky I was looking up the numbers, like just statistically. Carey Price played 22 postseason games, 2.28 GAA, 924 save percentage. Bob's numbers are better right now statistically. That's how impressive of a run he's been in these last 12 games. 2.15 GAA and a 935 save percentage for Sergei Bobrovsky. He's doing everything, and the fact that these are low scoring as well. You said it best. The goaltender has to be your best player, the guy who's always lined up, ready to move from right to left, and vice versa as well. Ready to, if there's a centering feed, when to do a poke check as well versus staying back, when to be to the top of the crease on a rush, to when to hug the post when there's a board battle in the corner as well. That is what Sergei Bobrovsky is doing everything right for, and that's why the Florida Panthers are here.
Yeah, and his stats have been absolutely remarkable, but they honestly are even better than the stats that you just read there, because those stats include the outlier games in Boston where he was just getting back into the net and gave up a ton of goals right off the bat. That he has slammed the door entirely since then. I don't think people fully understand how absolutely absurd his game was in Game 1 of this series. The amount of time that he was on the ice to make some of the saves he made, the mental toughness, the focus, like he is on another level right now. He has not played this confident since his time in Columbus, his last year in Columbus against the Tampa Bay Lightning that year. This is the best version of Sergei Bobrovsky we have seen since then. This is probably even better because what really kind of cemented it for me, where I kind of had that moment, like, okay, this is Bob's show. It wasn't even the 4 overtime game. It wasn't Game 2. It was actually Game 3. And Nason gets in on a breakaway, and he's going to challenge Bob upstairs, which is, everyone knows Bob has a tendency to go down to the butterfly a little bit early sometimes, so people tend to shoot high on him. Bob came way out of the crease, snags that with the glove casually, and made that look like the easiest save he's made all season. Mm-hmm. And that was a breakaway that was a really challenging shot to stop, and that could have been a huge momentum turning point in that game. And he just came out and slammed the door quickly. I think he's been fantastic. His positioning has been great, but it's the confidence that he's playing with that's really making the difference. And I think in Game 3 we saw he caught a couple lucky breaks with pucks hitting the post, and one that he swept off the goal line with his pad. And some of those, you can call them lucky breaks, but as a goaltender, those lucky breaks are often a product of just great positioning, where the only thing that you leave open is the post. You cover everything but the post, and if it hits the post, it's not hitting the post at an angle where it's going to go in, because his positioning is that solid. So I think he's earning his lucky breaks. He's playing so solid that the puck really has nowhere to go but off the post or missing the net wide, unless it's hitting him. So I think he's doing a great job. And personally, I think his confidence is through the roof. But you wouldn't be able to tell it based on talking on his post game interviews and his interactions with the press. And I think if anyone's watched through the game, how when he got to speak with Henrik Lundqvist, really showed the kind of character he has as a goalie. immediately gave his props to Lundqvist and talked about how honored he was to even be talking to King Henrik. But he's putting up generational numbers right now in the playoffs. And he's very confident, but he's very humble. And I think it's a good recipe for success.
Putting some respect on a legend, Henrik Lundqvist there. And of course, being unselfish, crediting his teammates for the work that they've done in front of him. I mean, it's kind of like quarterback play in the NFL. Yeah. Whenever a quarterback is playing well, you give credit to your teammates. When you're not playing well, you pin it on yourself. And the big credit to Sergei Bobrovsky night in and night out of what he's doing and just continuing to perform in that fashion. And of course, like you said on the Nason breakaway, just nowhere close to putting some mustard on it, nowhere close to a Patrick Waugh save that he in there. So nowhere close to that. But we're going to transition to segment number 3. We're going to go more into detail on the Florida Panthers and going from laughing stock to contention and going more into detail, and just to put perspective on, if you haven't been around this Florida Panthers franchise, whether you're just recently a fan or have been for the last 10 years, or even since 93, about just talking about more about the Panthers and how they got here with one win away from the Stanley Cup Final. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Birddogs. And I look better and I feel great when wearing Birddogs. They're stretchy fabric that makes my legs look great, and they're comfier than my other shorts and pants. They give me the freedom to wear one pair of shorts, pants on the golf course to a meeting, date, or hanging out with friends. Bert Kreischer wakes up and to his lake house wearing Birddogs, goes for a swim, smokes a cigar, grills burgers, chill with his families, all the shorts that he associates with the summer. Birddogs. College football nerds say that they're perfect pants for dads that have little extra gut. Birddogs makes them look great and feel comfortable. Pardon my take, host PFT famously wears pants, and the only shorts he truly loves are Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and enter promo code LockedOnNHL. They'll throw in a custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. Once again, that's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL when you enter promo code LockedOnNHL. Segment number 3 here on this Winans Wednesday edition of the show. Jacob Winans is here for an in-person show as we get ready for a Game 4 between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes. But like I talked about in my post-game show with Francisco Porta, Florida Panthers historian, which always great when he is able to come on the show. But of course, there's that article that Mark Lazerus of The Athletic put up that about the Florida Panthers and when Vinnie Viola took over to where they were now. And I read it multiple times now because I just wanted to just take it all in and just see, wow, this is what they were versus you wouldn't think that this day in the Panthers that they would be charged for food, which what was happening with the previous ownership. Brian Campbell was talking about how the hospitality of Vinnie Viola, taking him to his restaurant in his neighborhood. Vinnie Viola just being a kid from Brooklyn, and then taking the team to his restaurant. Of course, Vinnie Viola being an Army vet, taking the team to West Point, and the food, not only was it free, but it was bottomless too. And I've been in the locker room for their road game, a road game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And as I was walking out one time, I see like a kind of a mini buffet that the Panthers had. And honestly, part of me was thinking, Jacob, man, would I want some of that food that the Panthers are eating? But it's just great to see like what message it sends to players that this is a welcoming environment that you are going to be taken care of as well.
Yeah, I read that article also. I read it a couple of times myself. And it's honestly, if you haven't given that a read, I really encourage Panthers fans and just hockey fans in general to give that a read, because it tells a remarkable story. The Panthers were it was a poorly run organization, and it was kind of a laughingstock, to be completely honest. Brian Campbell talked about how the Panthers were paying $20 a meal for their own pregame and postgame meals.
Ridiculous.
This is the NHL. That should never happen. But the Vinnie Viola came in and really turned the culture around. And I think there's one point in that article where Matthew Caldwell, the team CEO, was very, very honest about what they had thought leading up to this. And he said that there were some times where they were in the process of trying to build the right culture and turn this around. And they were thinking, is this ever going to actually work out? Because they were doing all the right things and they just were not seeing the results. And it's just a testament to their persistence, but two, their patience. I think their patience has been, you really can't say enough about it, because a lot of people would have pulled the plug. We've all sat through the jokes about no fans. We've all listened through relocation rumors. We've all, and I know how much that hurts, especially Arizona fans right now. I really, as Panther fans, we should all be hoping they get to keep their team. I would not wish that on anybody, because there were times where the Panthers were about this close to having that happen. We've lived through all of that, and Vinnie Viola and the leadership of this team has stayed the course, and it's really paying off right now, leading the NHL postseason in attendance. Number one in ratings, multiple rounds of this playoffs, most viewers in the NHL. This is legit. This is not just a flash in the pan. This is legit. It's not a new thing either. The Panthers versus Lightning series the past 2 years has been the highest rated first. 2 years ago was the highest rated first round. Last year was the highest rated second round, even though the Panthers got swept. This is a legitimate turnaround for this franchise, and it really has come a long way. Everyone's got their own story for how they first started liking the Panthers. When their first game was, everybody remembers it. My first introduction to Panthers hockey was a team with Olli Jokinen. Nathan Horton was my favorite player. All these guys that weren't necessarily superstars, and it was a team that wasn't very good. But I used to get tickets to Panthers games free with a Little Caesars $5 hot and ready pizza, and that is not a joke. It's fun. We can laugh at it and it's funny, but that is the honest truth of how I started going to Panthers games. The tickets were free with a Little Caesars pizza. And now if you go looking for a ticket, it's probably $200 plus to get in the building for a chance to go to the Stanley Cup Final. It's an incredible turnaround. And if you, as a fan, you're very proud of this team and where it's come from where it was. You're valid in having that pride. It's more than just being a fan. Like this is something legitimate to be proud of, because it has come miles and miles from where it was just a few years ago.
Yeah, and you talk about city themed nights of giveaways, from Davie night, Hialeah night, all over South Florida, just trying to lure fans as well, and it not working. Of course, the Cure is winning, and of course, winning the draft lottery 3 times in 98, 2002, 2003, trading them away, and then of course, you mentioned Nathan Horton as one of the picks that they got. Jay Bomeister was another pick that they had. And of course, there was some turmoil with Rick Dudley and Mike Keenan sending the Stephen Weiss situation, sending him to junior, and without the permission. I can't even imagine Paul Maurice trying to send someone to even AHL Charlotte in a transaction and then not consulting with Bill Zito about it. And then of course there's a post of how loyal are you these days when it comes to sports teams. Nick Fairbanks posted a photo of Pavel Bure when he was traded at the 2001 trade deadline. I wasn't following the Panthers then, but I can only imagine just the pain that Panther fans went through for that. And of course, with what we've spoken, hammered everything about War Memorial in downtown Fort Lauderdale of what's going on, and of course, the toughness that the tough decision as well, and the inheriting a general manager from the previous ownership in Dale Talon to what they had now, and then conflicting styles as well. Of course, we know about everything that happened with the Gerard Gallant situation, even though it was under this ownership, and you know, people were wondering, is this the same old Panthers too when that situation came about. And then of course insert Bill Zito, and I just remember when he made that trade for Patrick Hornqvist. Let's not forget that he had a modified no trade clause, and the Panthers were one of his team, and he decided to waive it to Florida. Yeah, he hasn't played since December 3rd, but it sent a message very early that they're not going to be pushed around. They're not going to. They need that grittiness, that toughness, and even though they got one in Matthew Tkachuk years later, that was the start, and that was the chain reaction that the Florida Panthers had, and you started to see. We speak all about building blocks, like building a house as well. Nobody could have forecasted that Matthew Tkachuk would have been part of traded here. But now when you look back at that first transaction for Patrick Hornqvist, it kind of all makes sense as to how this is put together for the run that they're currently on.
Yeah, Bill Zito's first moves were to bring in a few culture setting type guys like Radko Gudas, Patrick Hornqvist, some veterans who have been there and really gotten it done. But I think another thing that really we haven't even touched on in this topic is this Panthers ownership group has dealt with some things that no matter what amount of planning you could have put in, they've had to cross some hurdles that were completely unforeseen. When Vinnie Viola bought the team, I'm sure he had no idea that there was going to be a very, very unlucky and honestly kind of unfortunately set up expansion draft with Vegas. You strike gold in a guy like Jonathan Marchessault, who if all goes according to plan in the next couple of days, we could be seeing really up close very soon.
And Riley Smith.
But you strike gold in a guy like Marchessault and then immediately lose him for free to Vegas. Situations like the Tom Rowe situation, I mean, you really don't see that coming. And that set the Panthers back, and they had to rebound immediately following that. A big one, of course, is Joel Quenneville. You make a hire that you think is the most stable, most locked in, guaranteed, no drama coaching hire you can make. A guy who has won multiple cups, and you're thinking, we got our guy. This is a guy who's going to lead us to a Stanley Cup. And then something from 10 years ago in his past that is a horrible mistake that he made that has nothing to do with the Panthers. The Panthers had to come out. They had to come up and pay the price for his individual actions, which they never could have seen that coming, and they were able to overcome that. So the Panthers have had some really unfortunate obstacles that they've had to deal with, and still they persisted and they stayed the course. And I think that's really a testament to the leadership, to the culture. We talk about heat culture all the time. I think the Panthers are starting to develop their own, and honestly, it's very similar to what they've got going down in Miami. It's a winning culture. It's a culture of professionalism. And make no mistake, the Panthers are now a destination for free agents. Matthew Tkachuk is an all-star player, one of the top 5 players in the entire world right now. And he made it clear he wanted to come to Florida. That was not something that was out of his hands. He handpicked Florida as a destination he wanted to be traded to. And I think that speaks volumes. And then we talk about where the Panthers were as an organization, how they were looked at around the league. They were not a destination. They were not financially viable. They weren't a team that was spending to the cap. They weren't a team that was serious about contending. And now superstars want to play in Florida, and the Panthers are so good they can charge $50 for parking. So
yeah, yeah, they certainly can, because the people will pay for it and they will come definitely. And you also think about how with Tom Rowe going in the same year, in the same calendar year, both the Marlins and the Florida Panthers had people from the front office come in and coach the team the rest of that year. So 2016, 2017 was just a strange year for really South Florida for South Florida sports there. And also it goes also the focus that Bill Zito and the passion that he had for wanting to come to Florida as well. In his interview, that food was brought to their table when he was originally interviewing, and then nobody touched the food and it was up to 3 a.m. and they were just so focused and just present. That's the right word. Present is the right word.
Can you imagine an 8-hour job interview? That's nuts.
And maybe not looking at your phone, or maybe not even like checking the time, or maybe not even going to the bathroom. I don't know. I wasn't there, but talk about they spoke about how he was animated and engaged. And even I got to speak to Bill Zito before game 1 of this season. Of course, the Panthers started 3 games on the road. Aaron Ekblad had his injury, and of course, we had an opportunity to chat with Bill Zito there as well. And even then, he was animated, even though it was a horrible situation. Of course, his opening statement too after the trade deadline about we're not going to give up on the team, we're not going to give up on the fans. I remember the way he said it too, and that it doesn't seem fake for him neither. And the fact that they described Bill Zito as animated and passionate as well behind the scenes, and the fact that he does it in front of the camera as well, it just goes to show about his commitment to this.
And does that not seem like a mirror image of leadership from the top down? The Panthers leadership, Vinnie Viola, Matthew Caldwell, Doug Sifu, all these guys who took over the Panthers as a new regime have stayed the course. They have trusted in their vision for the franchise. So it really should come as no surprise that when the trade deadline rolls around, Bill Zito is just a reflection of the leadership in this organization. He stayed the course with this year's team. He stayed the course with this year's roster, his vision for what they could be. And it's really coming to fruition. He stayed the course with his coaching hire, which lots of people, myself included, were very, very questionable on about midway through this season. And that's why he's so good at his job. I mean, he had a vision that of what this team was capable of that a lot of people probably couldn't see at the time because it just hadn't come together, and it really clicked at the right time. But yeah, Bill Zito's persistence and his willingness to stick by this group that he put together for this season, I really do think that's a reflection of the culture and leadership that the Panthers organization has now. Because if the front office, the ownership can stick by a plan for the 10 years or so that they've owned this team and see it finally come to fruition, Bill Zito sticking by his roster for 1 year and believing in this group of guys should come as no surprise.
Absolutely. And also one more note before we get out of here is the fact that they also have a full-time sports psychologist and helping these guys about quality of life off the ice, because of course these players are going through a lot of stress. They have fans in their ears all the time tweeting at them, even though they probably shouldn't check Twitter anyway. It's loud whenever the team is not going through a good stretch as well. And the fact that family stress as well off the ice as well, of being away from your kids and all that stuff too, and that helping these guys not only as players to help them win, but as individuals and looking out for them as well. And of course, with another one is casual wear on flights instead of wearing suits, which is kind of dumb either way, and just bringing a more relaxed feel to whenever it comes to traveling for games as well. So just a big credit to everyone involved in this organization who have brought this team. We're seeing it on the ice now, but this was building blocks from long ago, almost a decade in the making, and they're 1 win away from the Stanley Cup Final. But if you guys want to check out that article, make sure to go to The Athletic and check out Mark Lazerus' article. And it's long, but it's worth the read.
Well worth
it. Please, I highly recommend it that you guys go ahead and go and read that. But Jacob, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this live in-person edition, of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And great to be doing this with you in person. And hopefully the Florida Panthers can win the Prince of Wales trophy, as it will be in the building tomorrow at FLA Live Arena. So tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Definitely. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Winans 8. And yeah, we definitely will not be watching the game together because we're terrible luck, but I hope for the Panthers fans that are able to go. I really do hope the Panthers are able to finally clinch a series at FLA Live Arena. These series winning goals are all coming on the road. So we gotta get one of these series at home. And man, what a time. I'm so excited. I am so excited.
Same here, my friend. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And I will see you next week on the show, my friend.
Yeah.
And if you like what you're hearing, Please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for the everydayers, make sure to come back for tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We'll be recapping Game 4 of the Florida Panthers versus Carolina Hurricanes series. Maybe we will be celebrating the Florida Panthers advancing to their first Stanley Cup Final since 1996. So I'm Armando Velez with Jacob Winans, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.